Hey guys, the purpose of this video is to give you some guidance on how to set up a STATA do file. We're going to first look at an example of a data cleaning file and then the example of a file used to do a specific analysis for a paper, assuming that you receive a clean data set from the statistician. So let's dive in. The first thing we're going to look at is how to clean a data set. And so this is an example of a data do file. You always want to create a do file for all the analyses that you do in STATA. I always begin with setting up the information about the data set. So you can see this is my general, I just copy paste this into every do file I create. I start off with listing the path for the file name, the purpose of this particular file. So in this case, it was to clean data values and create scales. The author, so Vanessa Cox was a doctoral student back in the day. She created this file for me. The data was created. If there's any revisions, those go there. The version of the STATA software that you use. And then this is really useful as well. So when you are cleaning a data set, it is helpful to list all of the information about the total number of folks that you had in the raw data set, all the way down to the final number of participants included in your analyses. So you can see this is from TUTS. We started off with 7,002 participants in the raw data set. Of those, 873 were cleared on our original data cleaning. We decided those criteria were a little too strict, and so we revised our criteria. That increased us to 1,398. And then we decided from there to tighten it a bit. Folks had to complete at least through a certain section, section B of the survey. And that got us to 1,363. And then we wanted a complete data set of that 1,398, how many completed the entire survey. That got us down to 1,273. It's useful to have those numbers in case you need to access them when writing up your manuscript. So then the first thing that is useful here when you are thinking about this is to look at the creating your clean data set. That should say clean, that's all right. So you never want to use the primary data set. Never, never, never touch the raw data set. Hopefully, none of you guys will ever have access to it. The only people that should have access to the raw data are the stats team, and they should always release to you a revised data set. But even then, don't manipulate the revised data set they give you in case you screw something up. That way, you're not having to start completely over. Always save as a different name. So in this case, the raw data set we were working with was TUTS final data, and then we saved it as TUTS final clean.data. That is the data set that we were manipulating. So anytime we started manipulating things, we were going into TUTS final clean.dta, never TUTS final. Very, very important. That way you protect yourself from yourself, right? So then cleaning up missing values is the next thing to think about. So when you're cleaning up values, this for each command becomes really useful because it allows you to manipulate a lot of variables all at one time. A couple of standard protocols that we like to do in our surveys. 999 is our code for missing data. 777 is our code for does not not applicable or no response. And so, or it does not apply, excuse me. 999, missing data. 777 is prefer not to answer, right? Or does not apply. In either situation, usually what we end up doing at analysis is changing that to missing oftentimes. And so you can say for each, right, we replace that X being all the variables in this list to missing, right? And so that's how we did that. And then just scrolling down, that's just a quick example of how you can do a bunch of variables at once. It's just a nice trick that for each command is powerful. So you want to always give titles and subtitles of what you're doing. So you can see here, we started creating a lot of categorical variables. So we're recreating new variables, right? And so the gen replace command becomes your workhorse in that situation anytime you are creating new variables. Always make sure that if you create a new variable, that you also create the labels, right? So for example, here we generated the college variable. We had to define college. We had to link it, and then give a label name to the variable as well. So always make sure that you do that. If you need to make any sort of comments, that's what the stars in green are for. So you do that over and over again. When you flip to a new section of your analyses, always give it headings. So you can see, for example, right here, this was an eligibility section, and we were working with county public health regions and just validating regions. You can always paste in notes just using the green. This is a really useful thing to do. You can go /*, and then when you're done doing it, do //, and everything in between those slashes is marked as green and not included in the analysis. So really helpful thing. And you can see if you're doing a data cleaning file, if you label by section, that also becomes really, really useful to do so that we know that you're working within variables within section J of the survey, for example. So just a few tips about data cleaning. Again, gen replace is kind of your workhorse, and that for each command. So that's just a couple of tips on data cleaning. Let's talk about the more typical scenario for most of you, and that is you're going to get a clean data set from the stats team, and you need to manipulate it so that you can publish your paper, right? So this is assuming you've submitted your form for a request to do analyses, you've got it approved, and now you want to do analysis, right? You've gotten your data set from the stats team with the variables that you requested, but you still usually got to manipulate it if you're doing your own analyses. And so again, I start off with this green box. This green box is always at the top of every do file. So you have your file name, the purpose of the analysis. You can see this was variables associated with problematic substance use. That was the paper we were doing. I was the author in this situation, and it was revised by Angela DiPiola on October the 18th. We used Stata 14, and again, here was all the breakout of the VARs. You can see here, it looks like we broke our own rule, so don't do what we did here, right? So we had a variable called TUTS, or excuse me, a file called TUTS alcohol modifications from problematic substance use, and we saved it as the same thing. We shouldn't have done that. We should have saved it by a different name. So that was an oopsie on our part. So just be aware, always protect the original data file. I always start off with a data manipulation section. So generally speaking, I have a data manipulation section and I have a data analysis section. So the data manipulation section is always first, and that is where you are manipulating any variable so that you can do the analyses you want to do. In this situation, you can see gen replace again is our workhorse, and we're labeling the variables. We're just creating different categorical variables that we're going to probably use in our analysis. That's all we're doing here, right? So here, for example, we created a dichotomous variable. Here we created an illicit substance use variable, excluding marijuana, etc., etc., etc. Gen replace is our workhorse. We always label the variables. So once you are done creating your variables, and within that data manipulation, for example, just an example here, you can see you can create subsection variables. So like you can see here, we're working specifically in the life experiences section for data manipulation. Use whatever explanation text, the green text you need to explain what you're doing, so that when you go back and you look at your code book later or someone else pulls it up, they know what you did, right? But again, gen replace, that is our workhorse. We do a lot in gen replace. Once you have everything created, including your scales, then you're going to start your analysis. So I like to label my analysis by the table. So table 1 was my bivariate analysis, right? And so you can see then table 1, bivariate analyses, and then I worked with the age variable, the race ethnicity variable, the student variable, etc. the data manipulation to create these variables was done above. This is only about analysis. So if you don't remember how race ethnicity was created, you go back up to the top and say, oh, okay, that's how I created that race ethnicity variable, right? And so in this situation, these are only to run your descriptives and your bivariate analyses. And so you can see we did that. We had a lot of bivariates we were working with in this paper. And then we got to the table 2, our regression tables. And you can see here we were using logistic regression. And so we were using the logistic command and put in the variables we needed. Any kind of notes or comments are in green. And literally, guys, this is how I create my do files. So my expectation is that if you are working on papers on my research team, you will always create a do file, and that your do file will include the following elements. You will first have this green box at the top that just summarizes the file and the data set, and this information. You'll always have that. You'll always have a relabeled file, right? Remember, we did it wrong here, but you always want to have a relabeled file. You always want to have your data manipulation section, and you always want to have your data analysis section by tables. Label each table with the analyses that go under that table. Okay, hope that helps.